So the new album's recorded in Nashville, but is it a country album?
No, not remotely, really. I mean, there's one country solo, guitar solo on one song, and there may be some nuances, for want of a better word, which I love, actually. I really would have liked to have sung country songs, but I can't do them right. There's no point in doing them. I don't believe in doing anything if you can't do it right. My voice doesn't actually lend itself to that at all. It's too... There are particular sounds in a country voice, no matter what timbre it is. It's the turns and the scoops, and if they're not honest, it doesn't work.
So if it's not a country album, why go to Nashville to record it?
Well, there have been a lot of changes in Nashville. I mean, it really is now. I mean, you keep tripping over people from LA and people from New York, for better, for worse. It attracted a massive outside songwriting and production talent, and it diffused musically from its early core self. While keeping that, it's always going to be there. Production of country music is essential to Nashville. But over the period of time since I was last there, which was many, many years ago, so much more is happening there now. And I had recorded in Memphis, as you probably know, and it was the same state. And I had a sort of very strong feeling that life goes in circles. And this was a very large circle. And it was right that I went back there. I always felt very affectionately towards it, but I had no reason to go back there. When this came up, it just made a lot of sense.
So I believe that as early as the 1960s, when you were recording with the Springfields, someone had the idea of turning you into a Tammy Wynette.
Well, yes, there was a moment there where they thought that I could make some money for them, and in fact it would have worked. Because then I had no style. I really could have developed country style. Being around it for a month or two, I would have sounded your honest country singer, because I was capable of doing that. But since I've developed more of my own, idiosyncrasies or affectations or whatever, it's very hard to unlearn those. They are now part of me. And it wouldn't work for me to do it now, but certainly then. I'd owned a coal mine by now.
So tell me, how did all the material come together, and what was the criteria by which you chose it?
Just what stood out as a singable song. I mean, it's just kind of odd in that once the idea was set in concrete that it was going to be Nashville, the recording place, and I thought, well, now, I think the initial feeling was that for some reason I thought that I would be allowed to sing songs where I was actually comfortable in my own skin and my own voice and didn't sound as though I was going to explode in the next chorus. And most of the songs turned out that way. They're rather relaxed, but I can't get away with it ever. It's the ones that work best are the ones where I sound as though I'm going to explode on the next verse, the next chorus. It didn't stretch me as far as some British sessions have done, and I like it better for that reason. I just didn't want to be a diva.
The whole thing's got that feel. It's all right to make a comparison, a similar feel to perhaps a Bonnie Raitt album.
Thank you.
There's a sort of adult contemporary feel to it. Is that deliberate?
It certainly was my thinking that, I mean, it's a gamble and it may not work, but in the United States there is a market for that kind of singer. Now, I may not be the one. We shall find out. But certainly it was a direction I felt comfortable in going towards. And if it works, it's a great market to be in. And when we say adult contemporary, I don't mean sort of middle of the road, bless her heart, Vicky Carr. I'm not saying that there's so many formats and it sometimes gets very confusing. But if I were to go after one market, it would be that, because I believe there possibly could be a place there. We shall see. There are other markets in the world. We shall just see.
Now, tell me about the single. I gather it's a Diane Warren song. How did you get hold of that material, and how did you come together with Daryl Hall?
Well, I got on the phone to Diane, whom I didn't know. I just got her phone number and more or less called her up. It was Thanksgiving Day, and I was going to leave a message saying, could you call me? I knew she was a good plugger of her own songs. And I thought, yeah, well, she might be interested to see, have me record one of her songs. I still have an innate conceit that must take me over sometimes. I thought, well, she'll answer my call. She was actually there, and it was Thanksgiving Day, which is very unusual for anyone to be in their office. She said it was the only time she had to write with a clear head. Everyone else was at barbecues. And she played me some stuff over the phone, and she kept playing me this. She played me Wherever Would I Be? And I said, yeah, it's really commercial, but I'm not really I'm looking for up-tempo things. But she sent me the tape, and naturally, being Diane, it was on there. And I couldn't get away from the song. It just struck me as being a very strong tune. And the thing with Daryl really came up was it just lent itself to being a duet. I did a version of it, which will be on one of the releases where I'm by myself. And incidentally, it does hold up as such. But it's a different entity altogether. It's very poignant. Whereas you get a much more, I wouldn't say bombastic feel, but certainly a tougher edge to it when you get a male and female voice on it. And I think that's what the record company were looking for.
Now, I believe that you also, on these sessions, you did get to sing along with a couple of bona fide country singers. Tell us about that.
It was just a sort of secret thought of mine that I would like to do certainly a duet, if not a trio, with not like voices, but compatible voices. And I'd had a few phone conversations that were extremely funny with Katie Auslan, and she sounded like my kind of person. Both of us are fiercely irreverent about our work or about about record companies and about all sorts of things. And she's very funny about it. She says all sorts of things I wish I'd said, and has the nerve to say them. And she thought it was a great idea that I was doing one of her songs that I had heard her do on an album. And I just said, well, why don't you sing with me, would you? And she just said yes, which I thought was a great idea. And then we just thought we should really just flat out ask Mary Chapin Carpenter, whom I didn't know at all and never met. And the next day she showed up. So it was just obviously something we all wanted to do. But the nice part of it is that, I didn't know these people from anybody in the world. And I'm always surprised when people say yes to anything I ask for, let alone singing with me on an album track. And it was a really joyous experience. It was the best part of the record for me because it was done with light hearts and a lot of laughter. And it was a very nurturing experience. It really was.
And I believe you got paid a really nice compliment by Katie Auslan.
Yes. Having heard my original solo version, she said, "Girl, don't you ever sing a country song, you'll drive us all out of town." She's from Texas. And she's just wonderful. She's so funny. And I thought, no one could pay me a higher compliment.
Now tell me, you say that you're fiercely irreverent about your own material, your own work, as well as record companies in general. You've said, at this point in your career, at this point in your life, you don't want to be a diva. How do you feel about the work that you've left behind from the 1960s that, your image is still associated with?
The diva bit, I think, came a bit afterwards. I mean, remember, I was sort of very young and sort of bouncy and quite fluffy, really, and in the 60s. I think the diva only came with sort of various overwritten dramas that come along and that people make up all sorts of stuff. I mean, you do one small thing and it gets blown up into this legend of sort of pop callous proportions, and it was most of it rubbish, but I sort of ran with it for a while. I almost started to believe it for a while. Basically, I'm not a diva at all. I am, anyone crosses me, I am capable of saying a couple of sharp words, but basically the diva thing is such rubbish. But on stage, I think perhaps more than, apart from, say, Shirley Bassey, in the pop world I was probably given to more sort of waving of arms and general noise-making, sort of directing traffic than any other pop singer anyway. I moved around more and looked more fierce, I think, that just grew up with me.
When we talk about the 60s, your work's still surviving from that era, but particularly in Europe, there's a whole new generation of people who know you only from the hits with the Pet Shop Boys, like In Private,
Yeah.
which was a huge hit in Europe.
The nice thing that's happening, I mean, I can only judge it on fan mail I get, which is far more than I deserve. I get it quite a lot, which is amazing. And it's the cross-section of people who discovered me, yes. The younger set did discover me with Neil and Chris. But then they go and start digging out back catalogue, which you wouldn't expect them to do because it's so different to anything I did with the Pet Shop Boys. And get these sort of 14-year-olds who've actually gone and dug out things that were done in the 60s and are very knowledgeable about it all of a sudden. So it's deeply flattering. And then you get sort of people who are 80-year-olds who have enjoyed the Pet Shop Boys stuff too. So in a way, that really was a big change in my life. I was looking for a reason to sort of come back to Europe in general. Wasn't sure where I wanted to be. And it just dropped into my life, again, as all good things do.
Now, I would imagine, as you've obviously got a very loyal following throughout Europe.
Small but loyal.
In the 60s, when you were touring endlessly, as artists had to do at that time, did you play across Europe a lot?
No, it was very, well, for me and any of the sort of bands I worked with on those tours, you know, I was sort of the only female on the tour, and we never really sort of went too much north of Macclesfield, you know. Occasionally we'd reach Edinburgh, which was a big night out.
The whole feeling I get from the record is one very much of someone relaxed and happy to be at the stage of their life that they're at. Do you feel at a sort of contented phase?
Yes and no. I mean, I'll always be striving for things that are unattainable, which makes me a very restless soul, because I basically think they are attainable. I'm glad that I would like to be sort of about 10 or 15 years back, but knowing what I've learnt on the way. I might have a bit more, I don't know, get up and go. And I'm not complacent in any way. I think the good thing about it is without sort of avoiding things, I just feel that if none of this worked out, it's nothing to cut your wrists over. You know, I am thoroughly involved. I'm very happy with it, the work I've done, and I will give it 100%.